Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're hailing from. Welcome to a very special edition of In the Clouds. I am Chris Short, host with the most here on Red Hat live streaming and showrunner to the stars. I am joined today by the one and only John Chapman. John is the director of IT. I forget your title exactly. I'm sorry. I probably should have notes or something. That would be a great idea. Director, Business Systems at Red Hat and advisor of the Red Hat Blacks United in Leadership and Diversity, also known as B.U.I.L.D community. How are you doing today, John? Feel free to introduce yourself in your own way, right? Like I'm sure your title and positions are, they are awesome, but you have more of a story than just that.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, my name is John Chapman. I'm Director of Business Systems, and I know you probably know what does business system represent?
That could mean a lot.
Could mean a lot. Well, from a Red Hat perspective, I work in the enterprise applications group of IT, and business systems deals with our financial applications, also our workday applications. My group is responsible for managing all of those applications from a support standpoint, from a platform, from an upgrade standpoint. We're kind of like the engine inside of Red Hat IT that is supporting Red Hat as a company.
And you do a fantastic job of it. I routinely brag about Red Hat IT and how good it is. I genuinely mean that. It's the best IT org I've ever worked with in the 25 years I've been in tech, seriously. And some of those IT orgs I ran. So yeah.
Right.
I've never walked into the office there at the walk-up desk and not left with a smile on my face. Apologies for the dog, folks. But y'all do a fantastic job. And, the idea of this conversation was to talk a little bit about how you make Red Hat IT successful. And I'm going to shut my door real quick while you answer that.
Yeah, we are a organization of about 700 employees in IT, located around many offices globally. And our CIO is Mike Kelly. And I work in enterprise application, who is led by Grayson Williams, who's the vice president of enterprise applications. In our organization, we're around about 135 employees, supporting some 18,000 Red Hat employees around 60 different offices around the globe.
Yeah, and we were talking in the pre-show about how decision making happens, and it has to happen at scale because it's one Red Hat, right? 60 offices across the globe, 18,000 people. The decisions you make, even the little ones, have big impact, right?
Yes.
Yeah. The selection of software for, VPNs, for example, is, important these days because now we're all remote. So,
Yes.
Talking about the times we're in, how did that transition go from that kind of hard shift from you're in the office one day to the next Monday, you're not in the office?
Yeah. So let's kind of go back in time. Let's go back to March the 10th, 2020.
Mm-hmm.
What we're watching, the NBA decided to shut down.
Yeah.
The ACC tournament shut down. The Big Ten tournament shut down. The NHL shut down. And now there's a shock of all sports. And so when you think about sports, okay, that's kind of like one of the entertainments of America. And so now when you see that shut down, companies are also starting to look at what do they need to do. And so Red Hat, the rumor was going through off the office, we're going to shut down soon. Oh, we're going to shut down soon. What does that mean? Because a lot of people work in offices around the globe. So now from an IT perspective, wow, IT now is on the hook for how do I enable some 17,000 employees to move from their office to move to their house. And so that was a lot of collaboration. And this just thinking of, do we want to connect our employees in a secure way? Yep. So if you think about something called a VPN, virtual private network, that is a way of securing it. So you got to think, how do we support that number of employees? And so our IT team got the idea of, let's make sure we get this going. Let's get a global VPN so that when individuals go home, the first thing you would do is you don't want that customer experience to be challenging. You want that customer experience to be a smooth transition. And I have to give a lot of kudos out to the team that manages the network. They made it a streamless process. So when that Monday started around, March the 16th, everybody was able to connect. There was multiple networks. You didn't hear of complaints about hey, I can't get on. My network is slow. Now, when it talks about network being slow, there's a lot of variables. Your house network, so many different things.
There's only so much you can troubleshoot there.
Yeah. So they were able to make that a smooth transition for our teams.
Yeah. I mean, and I work remote already. So like I saw no change in experience, which was shocking to me, having gone through like, oh, a snowstorm shuts down the Raleigh Durham area, and all of a sudden everybody's VPNing into a VPN that hasn't been fully tested for like the entire staff to have to tune into it, right? So for me to have a seamless transition from, you know, people in office to not in office, like mad kudos, like, because that is just phenomenal work. You know, keeping people that weren't in the office connected was just as important, and you pulled it both off, in my opinion. So good stuff. So, you know, what makes Red Hat's IT department so awesome? Can you explain how our IT services are built around Red Hat products and how we drink our own champagne to an extent?
Yeah. So when you hear about Red Hat products, we talk about Red Hat on Red Hat. And that's not like putting one hat on top of the other hat. Mm-hmm. That's really around running our own products. So if you think about OpenShift, you think about, you know, those products. You think about, you know, some of our certificates. We use our own certificates. We create our own certificate. And when you think of that in the industry, a lot of times they don't say, well, I don't know a Red Hat authentication certificate. So we go back and say, yes, we do our own certificates. We create our own tools. And also there is, you know, we have our own middleware solutions that we have available, that instead of us having to go out and purchase those middleware solutions, we're able to use those middleware solutions. Not only do we use those, but we go out and brag about them. We actually go out and tell our other customers that we are actually using our products. And that's a great story to tell when you have your own IT organization using your own products. And not only is it efficient, but it's also cost effective that we're able to use our own products, and not only our own products, but they also work too. That's one of the key pieces of our products.
Right. Like it creates feedback loops and to improve products. And then B, it shows us, the people that are working on the products and technology teams, where we can make improvements. Because if you're adopting it and you're having problems, that means everybody else could have that same problem, right? So
that's correct.
Going back to my notes here, a lot of Red Hat blogs and content are highlighting DevSecOps lately. We had Kirsten Newcomer and Jamie Scott on the last episode of In the Clouds to talk about, you know, shifting left or shifting right if you're from a society that reads right to left. Can you tell us about how you envision shift left within Red Hat, or how you see the importance of DevSecOps occurring in your own day-to-day?
Yeah. So when we think about shifting left, and so I'm going to use the context of, you know, if you're a support team, you want to shift that left to some other team. So that's one way of a term of a shifting left. And so when I think of, you know, the basic support that you have to do, you know, kind of like tackling and, you know, other minor issues with respect to a laptop, that would say, okay, instead of having a L1 person take care of that, let's shift that to somebody else who can handle that from that perspective. So you can look at that as a way of shifting left. Now, when you think about DevSecOps and we think about DevOps is this continuation of updating. And when you think about Spotify, think about Netflix, they don't have an opportunity to shut down their applications to do a maintenance. So you got to think of that. Okay, now how do you ensure that I'm going to do this DevOps on a continuous basis? So you have a model where you can do this. But now, as we know, when we think about ransomware, we think about security, now you got to think about how you embed your security as part of that. Now what they call it the DevSecOps. Mm-hmm. And so that is around how you ensure that you're not only creating a continuous improvement, but also you're making that a secure continuous improvement. So I think that is where you think about the DevSecOps.
Right. When you sit down and you're about to put a new tool into place, right? Like I am sure there is a long checklist of things that tool has to like meet, you know, to be on and available to all Red Hatters. but I feel like you spin up new services all the time, right? Like you make things more accessible to us on a regular basis. Like I know you have, 100+ people, but your productivity exceeds that. So how do you make that scale happen, right? Like it seems like you have thousands of people working for you, but you don't.
Right. If you look at the ratio of a 18,000 employee company serviced by 700 IT members, and then when you take 700 IT members and you start breaking them down into groups, you start talking about very small groups of people. So one of the ways that we work through that is a lot of collaboration. Being Red Hat, being open source, there's a lot of ideas we get externally from, people that tell us, hey, here's some best, opportunities. And so we start looking at applications and how we start to roll those out. We start thinking first, in my area, when I think of enterprise applications, and that we support a global organization. So the first thing we look at is, can it meet the compliance rules that we need to have? If there's some regional or localization rules around that, can it meet some of those? Then you got to go to your always go to your InfoSec guys and say, hey guys, I need to just check this, verify that this is a good tool. And then if you're also looking at a supplier product, then you got to look and see, is that supplier a worthy supplier that you can do business with?
Right.
And then, if you're an accountant person, okay, now how much is it going to cost? You look at those things. And so when you put all of those factors together, then you start thinking, okay, now I got a viable solution. Now the key thing is, how do I put that solution in place real quick? How do I get that out in the market real quick? And so part of that is building a framework that allows you to replicate that framework over and over and over. And so in my group, one of the things we've been able to do is we expanded to global regions around the world. We've got a playbook, and that playbook is very creative, that you can add pages to that playbook. And then that playbook is what we're able to use and do over and over. So that is just another way of how IT is able to kind of scale with a small organization, but also be impactful.
Right. That playbook is not an Ansible playbook, to be clear, right? Like it is a procedural guide, we'll call it, for implementing it. Having that instantiated in your organization brings great benefit. And, it is shown clearly through your work. But you've been at Red Hat for how long?
17 and a half years.
Congratulations. That's awesome. But your team started at 17 and has grown to 700, right? Like how, I mean, that amount of growth and change, how did you, kind of come to grips with that just occurring? Like it has to be a continuous cycle of just, add-ons, right? Because I remember when I joined 3 years ago, it was 12,000 people. So there's 6,000 more people here than when I joined. Now there's compared to you, there's so many more people than when you joined.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so kind of talk. I'll give you kind of a little history of that. Well, as Chris said, I joined Red Hat in 2003. Very small company, 500 plus employees. And IT kind of sat in one corner of the office in the building. And at that time, things were very fluid. You have a small IT organization. Some rules were very loose. And so everybody just, the thing you do is you come to work to get things done, to make sure that you can come work the next day. So that was a continuous process. Then, I've been part of an organization where I've had an opportunity to travel to places like Brazil, Singapore, all those places where when I started, Brazil was not even an office at all. It was just it was selling products to a distributor. So we had to go there, set up Brazil. Now you think of Sao Paulo supporting, Argentina, all those countries are there. Then Singapore. And so when you think about that, it goes to a transformation. That transformation is around how you scale. And so, we went we hit our first $1 billion in 2012. Now we're around a $4.5 billion company. And that's only 9 years later. And so you can think about it, that it's continuously to expand. It's actually moving faster. So it's rotating much faster. And so for us to go from 17 to what I thought at that time to now 700, that's a major thing. And that's 700, man. We've probably lost hundreds of people in between. So you can
so it's churn
2,000
too.
people.
Yeah. I mean, you have to have that capability kind of ingrained in your operations, right? Like scaling is what you do day to day, and having that kind of adaptation to the changing environment. How do you kind of like drive home the continuous learning that has to occur within the organization as a result of the constant change?
Yeah, great question. And if you think about it, changing is happening much faster today than what it was. And so,
it's exponential, not linear. Yeah.
Right. It's exponential. And so now one of the things we have to do is we have to ensure that our teams take time to learn new applications and new tool sets. They have to be open to that. And so there are tools like LinkedIn Learning, other things that, you may have. And then Red Hat is very good about having lunch and learns where we have a lot of experts within Red Hat. They give you an opportunity to kind of talk about different products. And I'm not talking about just Red Hat experts. I'm talking about world leaders, experts in their field. And it's so great to get an opportunity to hear from those individuals when they come and be able to present. And so each day you got people having great ideas, people collaborating, talking about how we can make changes in Red Hat. And at the same time, how do we scale from an IT perspective for us to continue to be awesome? We have to actually scale faster than our business. We have to be actually scaling faster than the business. And the business coming to us and say, I want to do something. We have to be providing them a customer experience that's ahead of their time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to think ahead because you got to be ready for the, next 1,000 people to come on board before the first 1,000 did, right? Like it's one of those things of, I'm looking at chat here. Got a couple questions I'll ask you in a minute. It's one of those things where continuous learning is important. Ability to adapt and change is important. And then like having that culture is vital, right? Of learning, just constant learning, not resting on your laurels kind of thing. Don't feel obligated to answer this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because, we're open here. What advantages or challenges did we go through when we became part of IBM?
Oh, okay.
No, that's not a hot one or anything. Yeah. No, so there you go.
Great question. As I mentioned, my organization is responsible for enterprise applications. So if you think about enterprise application, that's all your application that is responsible for all your financial information. So come day one, when we became part of IBM, you can imagine all of the complexity we had to go through to ensure that we actually shut down Red Hat on July the 9th, and you come up as IBM on July the 10th. So that was one of the things that we had to kind of work through. And being both of those companies are public companies, imagine that you got shareholders making sure that, hey, when Red Hat shuts down, I want to make sure that Red Hat shuts down as a compliance and a risk-averse company. You want to make sure that you did that. And then at the same time, now you got this big company named IBM that is coming now it's coming over to be over arching the Red Hat, and then still saying, hey, Red Hat, we're going to leave you in your neutrality. We're going to still leave you alone. So that was one of the things. So now let's fast forward to today. So Red Hat still has its neutrality. It still has its own independence, but also Red Hat is a part of IBM. So things that, you could usually see it in the news, you don't really see that. You see a lot about from IBM, but also you see a lot of things from Red Hat. And so I can say, one of the challenges probably was Red Hat was very open, and, we're still open, but now we're part of a bigger company of an IBM. And so that's just some of the things that, we see as Red Hat as well. We're part of this big company, but also we're still Red Hat. And I think that's the problem. So the challenges could have been around, making sure that we are doing all the due diligence to be a part of a large organization. Even though we did our due diligence as a small organization, now you have to kind of do those as part of a bigger organization. And then I think also the beauty of that is that when you hear about Red Hat, when you hear about IBM earnings, you always hear a note about Red Hat. because people are interested in seeing Red Hat. So even though we're part of that, we're still influential into IBM's information.
Yeah. I mean, for me, nothing has really changed, right? Like I go to an IBM event or speak at an IBM event every once in a while where I could have before, but didn't maybe,
Yeah.
I mean, we still have a very, very kind of neutrality based relationship. As our CEO of Red Hat has said, we have a completely different culture. He has said that numerous times in the press. So Sani, I see your question about Red Hat certificate, but I'm not sure what you mean by end market. So if you could ask that question another way, I would appreciate that. Thank you. Let's see, what else can we talk about? Oh, so, I mentioned the walk-up desk in the tower, right? Virtualizing that experience had to be a challenge because it was literally like a person and a computer, and you brought your problem to it and it was solved either right there on the spot or within, a reasonable amount of time shortly thereafter. How did we accommodate that as an organization?
Right. So, when you think about that, so you have so when Chris talks about a walk-up desk, so that meant in the office, there was a help desk you could actually walk up to. Mm-hmm. And then also the organization that I lead, we also had, when we're in office, people are like, hey, I got a problem. Can you just walk up to my desk and see what the issue is? And so when you're in the Raleigh Tower, you're like, walk up to that. So right before the shutdown happened, we actually implemented something called an enterprise application IT chat. Now, if you're familiar with Slack and you're familiar with other types of tools, Red Hat uses Google Chat. That's our processor right there. So we started a enterprise application chat, and what that was it's kind of like ask me anything, but we didn't know really what there was going to be. But when you open that chat, you started getting people asking all kind of questions. Everything from, hey, my laptop has a black screen and it won't come up. What can I do? And I'm a system person. I'm like, well, I don't know, but I can get you in contact with the right person. And just the fact that you can get them in contact with the right person was more than enough. And so really we focused on using a walk-up chat to become more of a virtual chat. And at the same time, even the help desk, you had to figure out how to make that much easier. And so from a help desk perspective, they also have a phone if you can call. Now, to our team, we don't have a phone. We're not going to allow people to just pick up the phone and call. But we made that process very seamless. We made it where as a customer focus app, even though you can't physically touch me, you can virtually touch me. You can reach out to me and I can respond to you. And that was another way we were able to make that kind of virtual help desk work very well.
And it did, right? Like I onboarded an intern this summer, Bobby, as people, if you watch the channel on a regular basis, you've seen him on, and his experience was just stellar, right? Like if he had a problem or I needed a laptop issued or, I had to open a ticket for him once and I would get a chat message. It wouldn't be an email from, I got the email from ServiceNow acknowledging, but like 10 minutes later, it's a chat message. Hey, did you mean XYZ? Yes, that's exactly what I mean. It's like, okay, hang on a second, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I just sent him an email. He should have what he needs. And it's like, done. And I'm like, wow, that's a level of experience that you normally don't get from, I submitted a ticket kind of thing. You get that immediate feedback and it's very, very helpful.
And there are some people you can't give their phone numbers to. There are some individuals who say, okay, hey, if you do have an important one, you can give me a call. And when you give me a call, I will respond to that. So I do have a couple of people that can reach out to me through phone and I will respond to them. And then I think the key is building trust, having that trust with that virtual, chat itself.
Exactly. And trust in the process too, right? Like knowing that you have the best intentions and I have the best intentions from the get-go is incredibly important, right? And that's kind of how we build all of our relationships here in Red Hat is we assume positive intent, and making that a cultural thing helps the IT discussion, right? Because it's not a throw over the wall to IT kind of problem solving thing. Like we're all vested in a problem that solves it for the company or for my team or for whomever, my intern, for example, right? Like we're all invested in that. So very refreshing. Sani, I'm still confused by your question. But we do have another question from Mazen. What do you look for in graduates? And I'm assuming that means like people coming out of college for new hires, kind of thing. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because
Yeah. So Red Hat has a very active intern program. As you heard Chris talk about his intern. We have students that are undergraduates as well as graduates that are into that we come in and can have an opportunity. And one of the things we're really trying to focus now on is that interns come in. How can we get them to be a repeat intern? How can we get them to come back the next year? And at the same time, how can we get them to come into Red Hat? So in regards to your question, what do we look for graduates? We look for graduates who are open-minded, graduates who are willing to learn, graduates who are willing to also produce, be able to, commit to Red Hat, and also be able to understand that you're going to come into a corporate environment. Even though Red Hat is an open source and you hear all the great things, Red Hat still is a company. It is still a corporation. It still has rules. It still has regulations. But if you're coming to work in an exciting company, and yes, we're not in Silicon Valley, downtown Raleigh. We're in a couple of the offices. We're 18,000 employees. We are the world leader in open source. We're open source. We're a software company selling open source products. That's what solutions. And so now we're moving products. We're actually selling solutions now. So if you're excited about and interested in coming, that's what things we look for from a student. Those things that I kind of talked about, what we look for from them.
Yeah, I mean, the level of openness, I think a lot of people straight out of college don't expect, right? And then I do often wonder once they graduate and, let's say they stay at Red Hat for a little bit, what they think of the next company they go to. Yeah, I would love to get some feedback on that someday. But, let's talk about the other thing you do for us here at Red Hat. And let's talk about B.U.I.L.D for a second. Can you tell us about your role as a B.U.I.L.D advisor and explain for our audience what B.U.I.L.D is and how it started?
Okay, yeah. So I'm the advisor for the B.U.I.L.D organization, which represents Blacks United in Leadership and Diversity. So if you are familiar with ERGs, Employee Resource Groups, or Diversity Inclusion Groups, B.U.I.L.D is one of those groups within Red Hat. And so as the advisor, I meet with the chair and the co-chair on a regular basis. We talk on a monthly basis or sometimes twice a month, just kind of talking about what B.U.I.L.D is, activities is doing. So that's what the advisor. So let's talk about the history of B.U.I.L.D. And I have a special part in the history of B.U.I.L.D. I'm one of the founders of B.U.I.L.D. And it all started back in 2015 when we had an opportunity at that time. There was no B.U.I.L.D organization. There was no Black resource groups within Red Hat. And so within IT, we started having a conversation about how could we start that initiative for Blacks. And so I was fortunate to bring together several Blacks within Red Hat. We came together and started meeting on a regular basis. And then after we started meeting, it was like, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to move forward? What some programs we did. And so it became more of not like a lunch club, but then it started growing from a lunch club to now having let's go out together and let's go out and figure out how we can do other things and impact Red Hat. Around 2016, Red Hat started looking at an opportunity of developing and formalizing the D&I communities. Yeah. And as part of that formalization process, Red Hat came to our what we call as our Blacks in IT. We were a small group. And what was also going at that same time, we were getting people asking, can we join? We're like, well, we don't have an infrastructure to support. We don't have any type of guidelines.
Right.
So around 2017, Red Hat B.U.I.L.D was the first group to formalize through the D&I process. And when we formalized through the B.U.I.L.D process, at that time we had a different name. We didn't know our African American Alliance, and so we were just had a name, but the name didn't really gel with people. So
it wasn't global, right? Yeah.
No. Red Hat has come together and they collaborate. So the B.U.I.L.D group came together, collaborated, and came out and said, B.U.I.L.D is the name. We like it. It resonated. And B.U.I.L.D formally launched in 2017. I served as the chair for 3 years. And, since that, since we started, wow, you can name things. We've had book drives. We've had, now what is called Dr. Martin Luther King Day of Service, which is a day of service for Red Hat all across the U.S. and globally. You can do that. And so Red Hat, B.U.I.L.D continues to have that. We have executive sponsors. Our executive sponsor now is our CFO, Ms. Lori Krebs. She is our executive sponsor, and our chair is Clarence Clayton, and our co-chair is Corin Townsend. And we have a very strong leadership committee. And I think our B.U.I.L.D mailing list somewhere is around 500 people. One of those. And the thing about B.U.I.L.D is always about a shirt. Our shirts are something that stands out. So I have one up here today. Let me see here.
Okay.
This is
it's a great shirt.
This is our community shirt. And this shirt right here is one that this was our first shirt, and we still continue to get people that request shirts. That shirt is like the seller. So we get that. And so that's a little bit about the history of B.U.I.L.D. And B.U.I.L.D is doing a lot today with Red Hat. And I can say this year, we have 16 Black interns at Red Hat this year, which is the highest that we have. And I think part of that has been B.U.I.L.D's impact on diversity and inclusion at Red Hat. So that's a little bit of history, my role about B.U.I.L.D and how B.U.I.L.D is impacting Red Hat.
I mean, I got to say, the day of service, the first one we did, when Jim Whitehurst pops up on the screen and is like, hey, we're doing a day of service today. It's like, that this is for real. This is not just some fluff that we're talking about to bring in people. This is a real group, and y'all make an impact. Can you talk about what are some ways the organization can foster more diverse populations and inclusive team dynamics in general?
Yeah. When I think about fostering more diverse, organizations, if we think about now at Red Hat, we have the LGBTQA group. We have,
part of the veterans group. Yeah.
Yeah. We have a veterans group. We have a new Latinx group. We've got
AAPI is in there.
Native American, Indigenous Indian group. So we've got all these groups, and now all these groups are now becoming, formalized groups, and that's just great to see Red Hat investing into those groups. And now we have a D&I vice president. We've got a center of excellence around D&I. So I would say for a corporation, it has to be a commitment. You can't talk about D&I and diversity if you're not willing to commit into it. And I think that is what these communities push Red Hat to do. These communities are pushing Red Hat leaders to say, okay, we're a community, we want to formalize something. At the same time, we want to actually ask Red Hat leadership to invest and commit to that. And I think that's how the communities can really have an impact on organization.
Exactly. And there's a question in chat here I just answered. Of course. Are there opportunities for Africans at Red Hat? Of course.
Yes.
Yeah, we're remote. I mean, I think when I joined, it was almost 50% was remote. Obviously, right now we're pretty much all remote. So
that's correct. Yeah.
And the guidance right now, everything's still remote. So if I dropped the link to I'll re-drop it cross channel wide to the jobs page. If you see a job there that you think you can do, or you have some questions about it, feel free to ask me. You can reach out to any Red Hatter that you might know. They will tell you anything you want, question wise. So check out that page. If you have questions, feel free to hit me up. But yeah, we are a global company. You can work and sit in Kenya or any country on the planet, really, and just as long as you have an internet connection that's pretty stable, you can work for Red Hat.
You sure can. Yes. Matter of fact, I would suspect that most of my team, I have about 6 people in the U.S., and then the rest of my team are located in India and different places. And as Chris mentioned, everybody's pretty much remote 100% right now. So not only that, so people are now living with their parents. They've moved to another city.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get up and move now since I'm working remote. So we've had all those opportunities, and definitely if you're in Africa, all the opportunities are available. As our business actually is expanding into Africa, into different parts of Africa. I know in South Africa and other parts of Africa, we are expanding our business model there.
Awesome. Yes. So we mentioned how to build diverse populations and inclusive dynamics, but how do you instill in people to be aware of the problems that we're trying to solve with the DEI groups or D&I groups, and making that awareness, not as hard to swallow for some people, right? Because I know I hear it from some of my friends, like, I don't see color, and that's a red flag to me, right? Like, and that wouldn't have been a red flag 5 years ago, which is crazy to anybody and that had my skin color, right? Like, that was the predominant way of thinking back then. But that takes away a lot from the Black experience, thinking like that, right? Like, so how do you make that awareness kind of spread? Because I've learned a lot from B.U.I.L.D just being here.
Right. Yeah. So I would say, awareness comes through education and information.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that most of our communities, and I know B.U.I.L.D has invested a lot, is, doing Black History Month, bringing in speakers to talk about, Black awareness, doing our B.U.I.L.D anniversary week, also bringing in speakers. So a lot of sometimes is around exposure. When people are not exposed to things, then they don't have the awareness. So a lot of things is around how do you provide more exposure? And a part of that more exposure is being very vocal, talk about real life activities, talk about real life issues, talk about things that are concerning to, different minority groups so that they can understand, oh yes, I understand that, our numbers are very low, but did you know that if your numbers are 2%, you only got 2% Black and you got everybody else not 98%. So to me, it's like, oh, and I didn't know that. Well, part of that should be providing statistics, providing more information. And so awareness really comes around kind of like opening your eyes. If you open up your eyes and you start seeing that, you're like, in your example, people say, well, hey, I'm colorblind. But then if you open up and look around like, okay, well, I understand, but we're all not the same color here. And that is kind of like one of the first things. Yeah.
I see a lot of benefit from just the awareness of having all these different groups, right? Like, earlier this year, the Asian Pacific community, Asian American and Pacific Islander community, had a lot of tragedy happening in it. So, going and supporting that group during that time of need, I thought was an incredible opportunity. But the fact that I could even do it at all at a company was mind-blowing to me, right? Like, I have goosebumps right now thinking about it, to be honest with you. It's, and every year, day of service, I serve in other ways now because I can't necessarily go out to Habitat for Humanity or whatever and build houses with my existing injuries and everything, but I give back in other ways. And the fact that we as a company think about the world around us as we're doing our day jobs, and the people around us as we're doing our day jobs, really does change the culture, right? Like, it really does help people understand what it means, to be Black in America right now, or what it means to be an Asian American, earlier this year, right now, or, you highlight things that most people would not see. And it's coming from the voices within the company, not outside. And that is so refreshing.
Yeah, and Chris, in reference to what you talked about with the Asian community, several months ago, Red Hat leadership made a statement on their website about who we stand with, and that is very important for just not only our community but also for employees to know that the company is committed to that. We have a Asian population within Red Hat, in an Asian community, that we are very strong and supportive of them, and I think that is another way of companies around awareness, is that companies are making strong statements. Even when we had, social justice last year with, with the death of George Floyd, and how Red Hat came out and made a commitment, also also made a financial contribution. But again, I see that as change. 20 years ago, companies probably been hesitant to that, but I see that as change, and I see Red Hat's changing and also being sensitive to our communities and understanding how do we support these communities. We don't want our employees to be feeling like they don't get support from the leadership. And so making those statements are very important.
Absolutely. It is vitally important. And I have appreciated every blog post around, who we support and, where we are as a company as far as supporting diverse communities. Let's rewind it back to the beginning when it was Blacks in IT, and was just a small group of folks. Did you experience any skepticism or resistance to the idea that a company culture benefits from allowing people from all backgrounds to be heard and understood and work together productively? Like, have people ever resisted that or had some questions about it? And like how, for people watching, right? Like, think of it in the way, not to tell you what to say, but frame your answer in a way as to like, how can you help them do the same thing in their, communities and companies?
Right. So for the kind of first thing is that it was very interesting in that kind of talk about in those times how it was going through, because when we would come together, and if you're not familiar with the Red Hat office, most offices all have glass conference rooms. Mm-hmm. So when our group would come together and meet, it would be like, okay, you've got 12 Black people meeting in the room at lunch. And it was more like, okay, hey, I don't want people to look in and see us meeting and they're going to think that something's going on. And so that was the kind of a little bit on the hesitant side. And also, one of the things is you think about is that when we were going through that, sometimes we would hear some from our members that would say, hey, I talked to my manager, and even when we have our one-on-ones, he never even talked about acknowledge that was part of this. And so we don't see that as skepticism, but we see that as, oh, we don't know if you are aware of what's going on. And then within Red Hat, we have some open, dialogue solutions that where people can voice their opinions. And sometimes you would hear some of those opinions voiced, and you're like, okay, are we standing up for everybody, or people can make some comments? And so, when you think about those, you have to figure out how do you continue to press on. So you can't let one incident or something like that stop you. You have to figure out, I'm going to commit to this. I'm going to do it. And then when you get leaders that support it, not everybody sometimes is all bought in. So you have to work on getting the buy-in. And so buy-in takes time. It takes time to change. And so if you are someone who's looking to start a new group, you have to be like I was. Someone says, I'm willing to make a change. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to make a change. And that change is going to be, I've got to lead that change. And so that's one thing that I thought about very early in helping start the B.U.I.L.D community. And I see our community today is very like, we have to make change. Change doesn't happen overnight, I would tell you.
No. Yeah.
It's going to take time. And so if you're interested in starting a community or an ERG within your company, I would say start it and just continue. Just do it.
Yeah. And press on and, reach out to friends when you need help, that kind of thing. I'm just going to drop a link. Well, like we had diversity sessions at Red Hat Summit, and that I think was amazing, right? Like from a company perspective to, not only say we have these groups internally, but to give them an even bigger stage, right? To talk to more people is admirable in a company, as opposed to, going, saying, hey, we're not going to have a diversity track because it's actually part of our culture here, and it kind of defines the way we work, right? So and
also I would say it's all about our products too. Our products are not just geared to one person. Our products are globally. So for us to use global products, we have to have people that when they see our products, they have to see the face behind the products. Mm-hmm. And when they see the face behind the product, like, oh, that person looks like me, and they sell the product that I'm interested in. Oh, I have a connection. And so part of it is also around building that connection, as Chris mentioned. The summit was the first. The fact that now we have D&I parts of that summit is also good, because you don't know that person who comes to the summit what they're looking for, to figure out, oh, wow, I see a D&I panel I can go listen to, take that back to my company and say, hey, I saw this at the summit, which is a sponsored Red Hat event, and they made it a part of the event. So let's see how we can make it as part of our company.
Right. We try to set the bar higher, right? Like that's something I greatly appreciate about Red Hat. So what gets you up in the morning, right? Like you do a lot. I mean, don't get me wrong, talking about all the stuff you've done over the years, talking about what you're doing right now, you do a lot. So what gets you motivated?
Yeah.
Get you going?
Well, in Red Hat, we have this epic, we're effective, productive, innovative, and collaborative. And so when I think about epic, I think about how we make a difference. And so for me, getting up in the morning and coming in, well, you used to be going to the office, right? Not going to the office anymore, but
walk down the hallway.
Right. My organization, as I mentioned, runs Red Hat financial applications and a lot of the compliance applications. Mm-hmm. You got to think about how we ensure that our company can report financial, how our company can entitle customers, how we can send out invoices, how we can tell customers, here's your entitlements that you have. You can download information. Here's your renewal information. And Chris, you have to do that on point every time. It can't
every
be.
Time. Yeah, you can't be a little bit off. Yeah, you can't be a little bit off for one of those. You got to be on point for all of them. Yeah.
Right. So my organization, we just did a major upgrade to our financial application, on my major one. And when it came up, we had some, as big as input applications, they sometimes have some bumps and, and bruises where they come up, wouldn't do that. But I tell people, if you look at it, the fact of the matter, you could create an invoice, you could take a purchase order, you could entitle a customer, you could close the month, and nothing was off by 1 penny. So when you think about all of that, when I come to work every day, I think about I'm part of that solution. Yeah. I'm part of making that happen. I'm part of that thing. And so I started thinking about this question earlier, today, and I kind of thought about, we're almost thinking of we're like the engine inside of the car. When you're driving down the road, you want to make sure that you stop. We're part of making sure that you can get your compliant. When you want to listen to your radio, you want to make sure your electronics work. So we're part of enabling customers. We want to make sure when you start your job in the morning, you want to make sure that you end your job in the afternoon. So, you make all of that. And so when I look at my organization, even though we are, like I said, in enterprise applications, we're still the backbone of making a lot of things happen. And not only in the US, but in all these countries around the world, we're making all this happen every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's really what gets me excited about coming to work, because you come to work and you say, I'm making a difference in Red Hat each day.
Right. We do a very good job at Red Hat of telling people about the impact they're making, right? And that was one of the things I was told very early on. Like, this was the first summer I ever had an intern, and it was like, make sure they understand the impact they're making, right? Like, don't just show them the numbers, show them the problems you've helped people solve. Because we have a log of everything that's ever been chatted on the channel, right? So show them that, and identify these things that help them understand the impact they're making. Every manager I've ever had has done a similar conversation with me, and like, that is refreshing. Like, just to know your impact. That's something I learned in the military, was like, if you understand what your impact is long term, you will make better decisions, right, towards goals that are set for you. So that's something I really, really encourage folks to take away from this conversation, is that showing people that impact and demonstrating to them how what you do contributes to that bottom line is vitally important. So this is my last question before I just kind of open it up for you to say anything you want. What are you excited about in the next month, this year? 2022 is 4 months away. Like, that's crazy, right? Like,
yeah,
it's still March 2020 for me, and to some extent, but yeah.
Well, I'm an extrovert, so I look forward to being in the office. And I was looking forward to being in the office soon. Now we're not coming back to January.
Yeah.
And so, so that's the thing I look for. But also, the thing I look for is that, Red Hat has so much opportunity ahead of it in the future. If you just look at IBM announced they're going to hire 900 success managers to sell more Red Hat products. Mm-hmm. Who would imagine
it's bigger than your team?
Yeah, that's right. Who would imagine that? Yeah, so think about hiring 900 more people to sell Red Hat products. What does that mean? That means that the IT organization has to step up to the plate. We have to be transformative. We have to think out of the box. We have to think about scale. We have to think about, yes, we're 18,000 employees. What happens tomorrow when we're 25,000? We're 30,000 employees. And at the same time, you're still sending invoices. You're still entitling customers. You're still now selling new products. You're now selling what we call as offerings. You ain't giving the customer one product. You're giving them a whole solution now. So when you think about all of those, I think that's what I'm excited about. So much things are ahead of us that where in my 17 and a half years there's a lot more to come. And as you said, it's exponential what technology is doing. And then we can see that within Red Hat over and over. And, tomorrow you may have an office that has 10,000 employees sitting down in Australia, which is kind of unheard of, but that's the reality that could take place in years to come.
Yeah. We don't know. So we got to be ready to scale at any point, right? It's amazing to me how adaptive we are as a company. It really is. But with that being said, is there anything else you would like to discuss? Anything you want to say? Let me give you the podium for 10 minutes, if you want.
Yeah. I would just say that IT is really a kind of backbone into a company today. When you hear about, who would imagine that a hack would shut down a whole gas line across whole East Coast and then cause gas shortages throughout that. So when you think of an IT organization, you have to think about redundancy. You have to think about risk. You have to think about protecting your employees, but at the same time, offering employees all the tool sets that they have. As Chris and I was talking about, making sure that your Wi-Fi, who would ever thought I'm in the office, I can go from the one end of the building to the next end of the building on my same Wi-Fi connection.
Right.
And I don't
no wires involved. It's like magic. It's voodoo. It never would have happened 25 years ago. That would have been nuts,
Right. Or who would ever thought that I can approve an expense on my phone, or I can go on a tablet and I can do an opportunity for a customer on my tablet while I'm sitting on the beach. I'm still productive. And so IT now is making it to where we're allowing people to do their job anywhere in the world. It's just a matter of if you can get access to an internet, we can make you productive. And I think that is the thing that, I think about the leader of IT, our CIO, Mike Kelly, and what he talks about. When you hear about that, Epic is really around just making sure that we are part of enabling our customers. If you cannot enable your customers internally and externally, soon they'll start looking for another IT solution. And I think that is the thing that we have been very effective to do, is be able to provide a solution internally to where we're using our own products. We're making people available, to be able to use, the scale to think about, I'm in the Middle East and I'm in Dubai, and there's some rules and regulation for Dubai, and IT has to make sure that that works. Or you have to print an invoice in Arabic. That is, again, IT making it work. Or the person that says, hey, I want to take my PTO and I can't get into Workday, that's then IT making it work. And so IT has all of these. And so, I would tell anyone, if you're looking for an outstanding, a great career, you can look at IT. And I'd say things are changing to where it used to be you had to have a degree to get into IT. A lot of companies are looking at that as don't need a degree. You can come in, you can go learn the skill. That's the beauty of Red Hat, open source. Learn about open source products. You can take that opportunity. And so I'm just thankful to be able to work at a company where my organization has an impact, and I can see that each day. And I can also say I work with some very smart individuals, and part of that is we're a team. It's not one person, we're a team. If we're a team coming together, we work together as a team. And so I would say, if I leave you with anything, join a team, because a team is going to be able to help you. And as a leader myself, one of the things I always want to do is make sure that my team can be successful. That's the thing that I look for.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, John. This has been an awesome conversation. I wish we had more time, or, more questions even. Make sure we got it all. We didn't ask the cheesecake question. Did you want to weigh in on that? I know you probably.
Okay. Well, yeah, so, that cheese is it a cake or a pie? Let me think.
Is it a cake or a pie, in your opinion?
I'm gonna have to go with the pie.
Yeah.
When I think about the cheesecake, I think about when you go to Cheesecake Factory, they got all different types of cheesecakes, and I think that cheesecake has that crust in the middle and the bottom of it. That's that kind of, I think of a pie, of something you have a crust in there, and also I think about it's got the cheese in it. You can't put it out, but I'm a pie person. I'm gonna say it's a pie.
I'm cool with that. It's It's whatever you want it to be. There's no wrong answer here.
That's right.
Awesome, John. Thank you so much for joining us today. Look forward to seeing your work in the future, because I know I'm going to use it every day.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Stay safe out there, everyone. Up next on the channel is Dev Nation, and I'm going to make way for them. So stay safe out there.